Okay, I'm going to start with, since we were talking about Johnny Marr before, he said something that he said a couple of times about electronic, which obviously you guys were a part of. He said we were half craft work. We wanted to be half craft work, half chic, which I thought was quite an interesting way of going, this is how we are going to differentiate ourselves. Did you ever think about yourselves with that sort of specific way of we need to have this an element of this and an element of this, or not? So what's your take on what Johnny said?
Well, if we apply, we wouldn't have had anything quite as laid out as Kraftwerk meets chic. Funny enough, Duran Duran, when they came together, wanted to be the Sex Pistols and chic. It was a dialectic of Sex Pistols and chic. We wanted to do electronic music. That's how we sort of came together, because I had a little synthesizer, and then Chris was obviously quite a good musician, and I could play the guitar. So it started with keyboard and guitar, and then we started using a studio, so it became more keyboard. It became keyboards and piano then, actually, to be honest. And we developed a style, I think, quite quickly, which was dance music influence, but with pretty or melancholic melodies. And that became what we did, really. And that was the result of all the influences, some of which we might hear in this discussion, from our past lives, you know. And Chris obviously had the Blackpool clubbing disco thing, and I came up from having learned the Beatles songs on the piano at home, and liking David Bowie, and then liking Kraftwerk and stuff, just why I bought a synthesizer. So all of those things went together, but there was nothing as quite as defined those as what Johnny said.
Just to finish up though, because you talk about Kraftwerk quite a bit, obviously, but in the tracks that you've sent me, there are a few Chic Nile Rodgers productions in there. There's Spacer, there's a Chic original in there. What were the importance of Chic for you? Chris, you've probably got a very good answer here. You must have loved Chic from the outset.
It was good dance music. But I also loved the lifestyle that it represented. You know, this glamorous clubbing life of Studio 54. And I think that was the first group that just mentioned labels like Fiorucci and Gucci or whatever. And it just presented a very glamorous life of, you know, life in the discotheque, and which appealed to me. Because back then, you know, in Blackpool we used to go to the club, and we used to go to Man Fridays, and it had the studio, the Saturday Night Fever dance floor and everything, and so that was my first experience of going clubbing properly, really. And Chic was very much the musical soundtracks. And
did New York feel a long way away, so to speak, at that point?
I never thought I was going to go to New York, so yeah, it was. I only saw New York on television, and we did actually once have a party at Studio 54, but it was after it closed, really. But we did have a party in the basement at Studio 54.
99,
yeah. So we did finally get to go there, but it wasn't in its heyday. But I don't think that really matters, because it's the aspiration of it, and you know, I mean, I think we probably had as good a time in Man Fridays in Blackpool as they were having in. Actually, that's probably not true. Studio 54.
I was going to say you probably get a better time.
Neil, I'm guessing you went to New York first to interview someone.
Only a year previously.
Okay.
Yeah. And I went to New York first in 1982. I was flown to my first trip to America in 1982 for Smash Hits to interview Genesis, who I didn't really know very much about, to be honest. But anyway, then I was driven to what's the guitarist of Genesis? Mike Rutherford drove me in his car, the two of us, because their tour bus broke down. We went to go on the tour bus to New York from Boston or somewhere, and Philadelphia actually, and we drove to New York. And what was amazing was we approached the Midtown Tunnel. It was so hot; it was like August or something. And Mike turned the windows down. You have to give something as you went through the tunnel. Anyway, the car next to us was playing Planet Rock. I couldn't believe it. I thought, wow. I loved Planet Rock. I loved all those Arthur Baker produced early hip hop. That's not really what you think of as hip hop now, I suppose. I loved them all. Anyway, and Planet Rock was playing. I thought, wow, this is just unbelievable. It was like a dream. And being in New York, and in those days there was breakdancing on the street, which is one of my favourite eras of kind of popular culture, if you like. When you went to Washington Square, everyone was breaking. It's in the video, Malcolm Tran's video for Buffalo Gals, and it was a really exciting time. In those days, of course, though, you were absolutely scared out of your wits, really, in New York, in case you were going to get mugged at any moment, and there was always a sense of relief when you got back on the plane that you survived. But nonetheless, it was a very exciting time. Then a year later, after I'd contacted Bobby O, and I went to New York to interview Sting, and I met Bobby O. Chris and I went back in August, I think it was, of 1983, and it was still the same scene. That hip hop team was still going, developing, in fact, and it was a really exciting time to be there. And we went to the Fun House, and where else did we go? Was that the only club we went to? No, Paradise Garage. Garage. We went to the Fun House, and Madonna's boyfriend was DJing. Jelly Bean with his lollipop, and we were in the DJ booth with Jelly Bean. How do we manage that? Was that because I don't
remember that. So are you sure that's not false memory syndrome?
No, it's not.
There were nobodies.
No, but I was from Smash Hits.
Oh, you mean I wasn't there?
No, you were there.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, I don't remember that bit. Anyway, but then again, I don't remember yesterday.
I guess a good sort of side question to add in would be, over the years you've worked with obviously some really influential dance producers. Would it have been moments like meeting them at a club that would have made you think, I like this person, I'd like to work with them, or would it also have been, I've seen their name on a record and I need to seek them out a different way? I guess the question is, did you ever meet Shep Pettibone like Jelly Bean in a club or something like that?
No, they were all, I think, without exception, chosen for their records, their remixes. I mean, again, Shep Pettibone in New York, so in the autumn of 1983, I lived in New York 3 months to launch the American Smash Hits. And we used to listen to 92 KTU and other stations, Kiss FM. And Kiss FM had mega mixes by Shep Pettibone. And in fact, there was an album, the famous double album came out, I remember having it Smash Hits. And so that's how you would, that was probably, Shep was probably the first of those DJs you're really familiar with. He wasn't a superstar DJ. Jelly Bean was famous. Francois Kevorkian was famous as a remixer. But I don't remember there being that many, the DJ scene was a bit more anonymous in those days.
Chris, you were always, we've had lots of chats about Shep and you liking Shep. Can you remember when you first heard a record or a remix that you liked?
I think the first one was probably Phyllis Nelson. I like you, but I'd heard that in London because, and also because of that emulator solo in the middle of it. And also, actually, in New York, I think they used to play that. Went to the Saints once, and they used to play a lot of Shep Pettibone in there as well.
There were people who thought Shep Pettibone was an anagram of Pet Shop Boys,
which is great.
There was a kind of wonderful synchronicity about how he worked with Shep Pettibone, and his name practically was an anagram of Pet Shop Boys. I mean, there was something sort of great about
that. Because he's one of these people that will probably never come out of the woodwork to chat to, I'm really interested in what you remember of what he was like and what he did, because Jelly Bean, for example, has sort of stayed very much, he's still DJing. Shep, as we know, has disappeared and owns a hotel in
bed and breakfast, I think.
Yeah, and his review, there's a compilation came out, and he still wouldn't do any press. And Arthur was emailing him saying, "Just do one bit, do something for us, speak to rap," and he wouldn't do it. He wouldn't do anything. But I guess my point is that makes it more interesting because everyone else either continues or doesn't really quite leave music. He's basically put it on a shelf.
Well, Shep had quite a long career because if you go back to those Kiss FM mega mixes or master mixes, whatever you called them in those days, that would be 82, and then Shep became more well known as a remixer. And then we asked him to work with us. We asked him to remix us first, and then we got him to come over when we were making Actually to do some tracks, to produce some tracks for us. And then he became more of a producer as well as a remixer. He became the particularly from EMI artists, the must-have dance remixer, and then producer, and then Madonna, quite late actually, got him to produce Vogue, which is about 1990, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And that's probably the high point of his entire career because he co-wrote it and produced it. And then Madonna got him to produce the Erotica album, which, as I've read, Madonna's saying, people said it only sold 6 million copies, but actually Erotica was regarded as a problem release by the music industry for Madonna. And Shep sort of got the blame for that Madonna made a record which wasn't successful enough. And the last time we saw Shep was in club in Covent Garden, I've forgotten the name of it, on Sunday night place, Queer Nation.
Yeah.
And
in the 90s.
Yeah, I think it was when the Erotica tour was on, and he'd come over to see Madonna. And that was the last time, that's almost 30 years ago, that's the last time we saw him. And after that, it was when he seemed to retire from music. And even then, I think he told us he bought a hotel.
Johnny, I asked Johnny, do you have to like people to work with them? And he said his answer was quite interesting. It was, you kind of get a sense of what people are like. I get a sense of what people are like when I hear their music. You always speak very highly of Stuart, who makes very uplifting, shiny, optimistic music. What would you say? Was Shep someone that you warmed to and liked, and therefore working with him was enjoyable?
Oh yeah, Shep was a very fun person to
yes.
be with.
There's a lot of talk in the studio. We worked at Sarn West. Shep was staying in a hotel in Bayswater. We didn't really meet Shep. I don't remember anyway until we started working with them. I think it was sort of, the agreement was made over phone calls probably. And then he came over, and he was fun, and we used to chat a lot in the studio. He was very unlike working with Stephen Hague or Julian Mendelssohn, and Trevor Horn was always slightly intrigued with working with this guy from New York, in a slightly sceptical way as well.
Maybe didn't take him seriously.
He probably didn't take him seriously because he wasn't a proper musician or something. But no, he was, and he'd always be playing us the latest remix he'd done, and all that kind of thing. But he was a lot of fun to work with. And then he did great remixes as well for all the tracks. From 87 to 88, Shep must have done at least 4 remixes for us, as well as producing. What tells us we only one track on the album.
Yeah, his remix of What Have I Done to Deserve This was brilliant.
Really brilliant.
I remember being in the dance floor when it came on, everyone went wild. So it's always great when the reaction to the record is, people going.
So I guess the credit might be something like he really probably helped find you a wider clubbing audience, maybe? Would you say that? Or?
Well, remember the first thing he did for the Pet Shop Boys was he remixed West End Girls.
That's it.
And he took West End Girls, which was already a big hit, but they wanted an extra push in the American clubs. I think it was done for America. And we really wanted to do, Shep Petty wanted to do a remix for us. And he did that whole thing with the backing vocals, people going, West End Girls, and Stuart had that in one of our tours recently, that sample from the record. And he'd made it he'd taken all the atmosphere off it. So it was with a shock the first time you heard it.
Yeah.
Because it was sort of dry and sounding. There was no atmosphere whatsoever. but it was definitely clubbier, harder. You're much more aware of the musical parts and the rhythm and the drums. You know, it was a very different sound from the 7-inch version or the 12-inch, which Chris and I did, of the Stephen Hay version.
Chris, I recently went back to that Chet Pettibone mix for my show and put it on, and it kind of, I came to it with fresh ears. I've not heard it for a while. What was your reaction when you first heard it? Can you remember?
I absolutely loved it, but it was elements of that have appeared in all our live shows that Stuart's programmed for us, because Stuart liked it a lot as well. So the dee all that syncopated stuff,
yeah,
that was all shit. That's made it through to our live shows, and I think, yeah, I remember. The shocking thing is the screaming of West End girls.
Oh yes, it seemed very on us.
Yeah,
and very sort of American. I think one of the reasons that Stuart was obsessed by it and knew it was because, you know, our first album came out in 1986, and then the autumn of that year we brought out a remix album, because we'd had so many 12-inch mixes, and Shep, there was Western Girls by Shep, his remix. There was Love Comes Quickly, Shep's remix, and we had Panorama and stuff on it. And that album, which EMI weren't even that keen on releasing, sold 3 million copies.
Oh, a flop then?
No, we didn't have Madonna's scale of sales. That was. So a lot of people knew that record, you know, and it was just 6 remixes is all it was. And so the Shep West End Girls mix really became famous because of that as well, I think.
Chris, is it fair to say, I don't think I'd ask this question to Neil, because he'll probably, you'll see where I'm going with this one in a minute. Is it fair to say that when it comes to dance music, you like music that's uplifting and optimistic, that makes you happy, or is that not fair to dilute it to that?
Generally that's true, but I also like really depressing music, but that I also find uplifting in a weird kind of way. We've just done this Radio 2 programme for Boxing Day.
Yeah.
And there's quite a lot of misery in it. But business that Gloria Ann Taylor record, Love Is a Hurting Game.
Oh, I've not heard that. Okay.
So, God, most of the songs. What about Brenda Lee?
Oh God!
I mean, I like genuine emotion. I like all songs to do with unrequited love.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the best type of.
Well, the Boxing Day shows a whole of those.
Yeah.
About 80% of the songs, actually.
Yeah. But in a club, I like Euphoria.
Because the reason I'm sort of saying that is I'm looking at your list, and there's lots of Euro in there as well, which is fun. Whereas Neil, yours, it looks to me like when we say dance music, it encompasses everything from the first record, maybe dance too.
I don't come like Chris. I don't really come from a dance music background. So when Chris and I first met, my influences were more new wave rock music.
I was unashamedly a fan of disco, because it wasn't cool. You'd never really admit to liking disco, would you? One wouldn't.
No. I always loved Saturday Night Fever, Bee Gees singles. I still love them, you know. But I wouldn't have listened to a fifth of Beethoven at home.
Well, that was good. You can't.
Well, that's a big track of that.
Not for me. It's not.
Yeah.
That's it. You can't whittle all the disco down to a fifth of Beethoven on the soundtrack to Saturday Night Fever.
And also, you know, sometimes people forget that disco and punk stroke new wave happened at the same time. Now, to a certain extent, you're on different sides of a barricade there. So I remember when I went to Marvel Comics in 1976. We had 2 artists who made changes to American Comics for us and provided other artwork. One of them was a DJ, and he was the DJ from the era where you announced the record beforehand, you know. And he loved Donna Summer, Love to Love You Baby, because you could put it on, go to the toilet, buy a drink, come back, it was still playing. And that was quite pretty unusual in those days. And I didn't really like that record. I said, I don't really like that record. I like, you know, I don't know, Elvis Costello or something. And but now, of course, I would rather listen to that than Elvis Costello, to a certain extent, anyway. And meeting Chris was, well, when we met, it was an era where the Human League had a number one album, and so you'd arrived at that point where British pop music had taken in electronic influences from Kraftwerk, but also it was taking in dance influences. And also there's a weird thing that people wanted to be ABBA as well, like the Human League wanted to be. And so all pop music really became sort of dance music and started having remixes and stuff done. And I thought that was a great period because it was great songs, but also great dance records.
There's no ABBA in either of your lists, actually. It just is. Would you not consider them to be something that you would include in this, or is it because they kind of didn't have... Just interestingly, my friend's working with them at the moment at Polydor, and he's trying to get dance mixes commissioned.
We offered us. We've already tried to. We know the guy doing the show.
Already been rejected.
Yeah.
Because they've never been remixed.
There we go. So,
but you know, if you were to go back in a time machine to 1981, you would find that as far as the dance world is concerned, there'd only ever been one ABBA dance record, and that was Lay Your Love on Me, which was massive.
Wait. Gimme, gimme, gimme. A Man After Midnight. That was a dance record, wasn't it?
You didn't hear it in clubs then.
And what was the one called?
Lay All Your Love on Me was a huge gay record.
Yeah.
There was even a 12-inch of it. I think someone might have done an edit even of it, and probably an illegal edit, because there was a long version. I was always playing it in heaven, and that was for me anyway when ABBA became a dance.
So, Chris, ABBA, you're a fan then?
I like the sad ballady stuff. I wouldn't go rushing onto dance floor if I heard ABBA.
ABBA have never been like the Bee Gees. I mean, in the height of liking punk, I would rush to the dance floor to dance to Staying Alive.
Yeah.
There's no question about that. Staying Alive is quite punky in a way anyway.
Yeah.
But when ABBA went into their dark Swedish night of The Winner Takes It All, that's when I thought...
The day before you came.
Day before you came. This is right at the end. When I was at Smash Hits, we all went to a reception for ABBA's Greatest Hits and met only three of them. One of them wasn't there. And it was a very thrilling moment.
And just as a side note, since you brought it up and we're talking about it, I've actually
been offered ABBA, by the way.
No, I didn't.
No,
I've actually been offered ABBA for a mixed mag cover next year, but but without, I don't know if I can justify it without there being a remix by you guys or Stuart getting involved. Like, at the moment, I can't quite work out what the angle is, because the album is not in any way dance music, is it?
The second single is, I think, the one we wanted to remix. Could definitely be a dance record.
Could be,
but it's...
Yeah. No, quite, exactly. well, actually, that's no different to ABBA in the 70s.
Right.
Could be, but they weren't really.
Yeah.
They were a top 40 kind of disco, which was a lot of discos would have been, but they weren't really... They weren't like Love to Love You Baby.
Yeah. Now, I'm going to say we've done some good dance preamble now. I'm going to go into your choices. So let's start, Neil, with your first one, which is Let's Twist Again.
The reason I put this down, because I just thought of my sort of history of dance music, and the first time I can ever remember rushing onto a dance floor was when I was about 9 years old. We were on holiday in Scotland, staying in this funny old hotel, and on Saturday nights there was a dinner, and then there was a dinner dance. And I remember they played Let's Twist Again by Chubby Checker, which of course is a song about the dance you're doing. And the twist is the first time I ever really danced to pop music, and it was a great dance.
It's still the only dance Neil does.
It more or less is. And
never.
and I just, the whole family went on, we all twisted, and my father didn't, we all twisted to Let's Twist Again. And you felt sort of groovy doing it. You felt kind of cool doing this. Well, the twist, because the twist, of course, has to be very understated.
Yeah.
And there was something sort of quite cool about you were doing the twist to this, funky record. And
funny enough, we also danced to this record at the Winter Gardens ballroom.
Oh.
And I'd been, how old was I?
Well, I'd
really young.
Been about 4.
About 4.
Yeah.
So that was my first go on a dance floor.
Oh, wow.
Doing the same. I think we bought this record as well. Chubby Checker. Did you have it?
No, we didn't. I just knew it from the radio.
I'm going to do one more from you, Neil, before we go on to you, Chris. Virginia Plain.
Well, I've now jumped forwards 9 years, I think. In the 60s, you did sort of, I didn't really, you might dance at a party, you'd sort of shake your head and wave your hands a bit. But, and then glam rock came along. And this is a record I remember from the summer of 72. So just between I left school and started in North London Polytechnic. And this was a record, when you heard it, at the beginning, you rushed onto the dance floor. It was a fantastic... And I think
a clarion call, I suppose.
It was, yeah. And nowadays, dance music is a genre. It wasn't in those days. You know, Trevor Horn's definition of pop record is, something like a memorable song done to the latest dance beat. All records are meant to be, to some extent, unless we're a ballad, we're meant to be dance records. But this, Virginia Plain, I could have also had John and Moni dancing when they were going. Another great, we always used to rush on the dance floor. It was
funny back then, wasn't it? Because you used to choose which record to go onto the dance floor.
Oh yeah, always.
Because you'd go on, you'd rush onto the dance floor, dance to the record you liked, and then the DJ would play the next record. You
don't like this,
and then you'd storm off the dance floor,
yes.
And then some other people might walk on that like that record, and then you would only go on to the record that you liked.
Oh, so if you liked 2 records in a row, you would stay on?
You would stay on, but you would leave as soon as the record came on that you didn't
You
like.
wouldn't be on the dance floor
for more than 10 minutes. It was a very different experience to now. You wouldn't just be on the dance floor for hours on end. You would literally pick and choose when you went on.
Oh, I hate this record.
I hate it. Why is he playing this? And you'd leave.
That must have been quite traumatic.
Then, of course, you would play.
The DJ was, yeah.
But then remember also, he'd slow things down and play a ballad where a guy and a girl.
Oh, there was always a bit at the end of the night, the last half hour. It was
smooching.
That's when the boys used to move in on the girls. And you think, oh God, anyway, it was great when all this changed.
Right, Chris, we're going to go over to you now, so you get you can get a bit of attention for the next 10 minutes. We're going to start with...
I'm a big attention seeker.
Jump to the Beat.
Stacey Lattisaw.
What year is this record?
Well, it was the 70s sometime.
78, 79, I think.
It was that late. Yeah, because I'm not quite in order with my records.
No, but I don't think it necessarily matters, does it?
Well, Stacey Lattisaw was a classic record for Man Fridays in Blackpool. Everyone used to jump.
I was going to say it's not a dance, but
of course, jump to the beat, jump! And so everyone would jump, And one of the things in Blackpool, even now, is you go to Funny Girls or somewhere, and there are dance-offs, and everyone knows all the dances to all the songs. And I'm not sure, it must be like that all over the place, but in Blackpool...
I don't know that it is. I don't know it's like that in Newcastle.
Yeah, anyway, it was just a record that was played it just reminds me of going to Man Fridays when I was at school, and back in those days you could there was no ID cards, so you could go in when you were slightly younger than you were meant to. And I remember they said, how old are you lads? And I said, I'm 18. He said, oh, it's over 21s tonight. I went, oh, because I was like, I'm legally allowed to go in now. And but it was a lot of fun going there, and that was one of the main records I remember from that era.
I'm going to give you one more. No, the Bee Gees are big for you. Night Fever.
Well, Man Fridays again. We had our very own John Travolta lookalike who would come every weekend in a white suit and lead the dancing of the Saturday Night Fever dance.
Oh, wow.
And we would all...
This in itself could be a film.
We would all be doing the dance and he would be leading it. And it was just amazing. It was like you were in the film. It was absolutely... We had, as I said a bit earlier, we had the lighting up dance floor, we had the plastic palm trees, the whole thing, and we'd all be joining in the dance. It was just magical. And also, all the records off that album, particularly Disco Inferno, it's still one of my absolute favourite records from that era. It's not on the list for some reason.
It's all
you
good.
have to choose something.
Yeah.
And I guess to finish up on that, an emotional band, the Bee Gees, aren't they?
They are. Well, the thing is, I only really knew them from Saturday Night Fever, and then when I bought this Greatest Hits, I realised I had all of this before them, the pre-disco era. And there was so much to discover, so many great songs.
I kind of have done the same recently, but I just can't get through it all because there's so much.
Well, you see, as I'm 5 years older than Chris, I knew the Beach Boys, the Bee Gees, from the first hit. Massachusetts was number 1 in 1967, and in those days you thought the Bee Gees had sort of taken the Beatles sound and made it their own thing, and they were mostly ballads. And then in the early 70s, they suddenly did Nights on Broadway, this incredibly black-sounding record, really. And that was the start of the next version of the Bee Gees. And there's very few people who've made a seismic shift in their music. I mean, the Bee Gees in the late 60s and 70s had a very strong sound, and then in the 70s they had a completely different, and basically they recorded in London, the first part, and then the second part was Miami. And they had a completely different sound. And then in the 80s they came back as 80s Bee Gees. You win again. Complete Fairlight, the whole thing. They famously asked Pet Shop Boys to produce them, and we said we were too intimidated.
Can you imagine producing the Bee Gees?
I mean, us then, particularly. We could probably have a go now, but then.
Do you
ever wonder what...
I wouldn't have been able to.
You would have been,
I'd have been too much in awe. I wouldn't have been able to do anything.
Did you both see the documentary recently? The Bee Gees documentary?
I've seen a few.
Was the one that came out with...
Yes, I did.
Barry.
Yes.
It's very sad because he feels guilty that he's the last man standing.
And I think the oldest of them.
Yeah. It's worth watching at Christmas, although it's not the most, cheery. But it is also lovely because he lives. He does also still have a nice. His wife is around, his kids are around. He lives in Miami. But he's the last bit of the legacy, basically. Yeah.
The Bee Gees also, like ABBA, have had this trajectory where, because of Saturday Night Fever and the incredible success and omnipresence of that, the Bee Gees were sort of regarded as utterly naff, which I never got because
I was actually going to ask you this. So, Chris, one of the things that I like about dance music and what I personally, putting a bit of myself in here, when I went to Ibiza and when I went to DC-10 and blah, 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 I felt cool. I'm not old enough to have a handle on whether the Bee Gees in the 70s were cool, which is kind of what we're talking about. Were they cool or were they massive?
They were massive, they weren't cool.
I've never been concerned with cool. I either like it or I don't. So if I like the music at DC-10, it's because I like the music. It's not because I think it's cool to be there. In fact, you can go to DC-10, it can be boring.
True.
Depends on the night. Or who's DJing.
But I think Neil's right. I'm aware that the reality is that they did have these weird shifts in their career.
Yeah.
I think when something is very, very popular, in those days, to be very, very popular, made you a bit naff. Mm. And people didn't like, sort of NME types would sneer at ABBA, the Bee Gees and the Carpenters. Whereas now, and Queen.
Yeah.
I know I would, particularly the last two, but now I can, in those groups, I can hear time has removed all the cultural fluff around them, and you just hear the music for what it is and what amazingly strong songs they are.
Exactly.